just machining up a pretty huge run of architraves and skirting boards for someone. They're tricky things to machine. I'll show you the profile. So what we've got is a really thin edge on this architrave. It's less than 3 mil of timber left on this edge there, and it's 70 mil tall, and the profile is going up to pretty much 60 mil of the architrave, and we're machining all of this away. It doesn't leave you much timber left to sort of support it as you make the cut. So there's a special little tool that will help you hold the timber and make a really nice accurate feed in and feed out without any sort of snipe on the ends of your cuts. So I've obviously planed these up to a square section, and I've run a rebater through on the angle. The reason I've run it through rebater is just to reduce the amount of timber I'm going to be removing with my final cutter pass. The less timber you remove on the last pass, the smoother and more ripple free the cut will be, so you'll have a nicer finish on your timber. So I just set that up, bear in mind that's my finish piece, as close as I sort of dared, and ran everything through. So I'm just reducing that amount of timber that I was going to take off. So that was my first cut through. The next cut is really important. You want to use the special tool to make sure these profiles come out absolutely perfect. So when I'm talking about the special tool, it is a back fence. So this is my back fence. I've just made one out of birch plywood, and I slot a batten in my T-slot that's in my felder spindle. That just locks in. It's a really tight fit in between these grooves, and I've threaded some threaded bar through, and a slot in this board allows me to move that in and out and adjust it to the thickness of my timber. I'll just move the wheels out of the way. The theory of this back fence is that it cannot move, it's completely fixed. That gives you an advantage when you're using your power feed wheels, because the wheels will put a downward pressure on the moulding. Without the back fence, when you put a downwards pressure on that, what it tends to do with the vibrations of machining is just move away until it tips and you've ruined your cut completely. So a really tricky thing to get through the spindle without one of these, but with that fence in place, you can put as much downwards pressure using your wheels as possible. In fact, more the better, as long as you can lubricate your bed and stuff enough to get it to move through without too much friction. Like as much pressure as possible is great, just to hold everything really nice and solid. Wax this edge of your back fence up really highly. When you're setting up, what I would do is put the piece of wood upside down between the fence and the back fence, and obviously push it up nice and tight to it, and then lock it off on the bolts. So we want that fence to be the same thickness as the thickness of the timber. We're going to need to machine when we're planing up our timber, so our raw stock needs to be well machined to a consistent thickness. Actually, you're going to have a nightmare of a time pushing them through here, because obviously this is all fixed. There's no spring tension in this. And while we're on the subject of spring tension, like fingerboards or whatever, they're not good for this type of moulding. What the fingerboard will do is push it into the cutter. So you'll start feeding it in, and when it hits the fingerboard, the pressure of the fingers will push the moulding in. So imagine if your fingers were here with spring pressure, they'd actually push that moulding in. It's really difficult to get that set up so that it sits straight, because they've got sort of a spring-loaded pressure, so it will vary depending on the bit of wood. So if you push a bit of wood through that's slightly out of square, it will put more pressure on the fingers, and it will cut slightly different to one that is machined square. So I've never used them. I don't like them at all. They do have their place. I've got a little spring wheel, like a spring-loaded wheel, that I can use to point load some spring pressure on a moulding if I need to, but this is by far the best method to get things through nice and smoothly. So yeah, setup wise then, exactly same thickness as the piece of timber. Then when it's obviously this way up, I put quite a lot of angle on the power feed wheels so that it sort of drags the top of the moulding against the fence as hard as you can get it to do, and that will actually have the effect of pushing the bottom out. And what we want to do is try and get as much pressure outwards as we can. I mean, the very much ideal thing to have would be if you could get something in the fence that pushed this moulding back against the back fence. I mean, that would be the ultimate dream, in like the machinist's dream, for getting a perfect pass through this thing. I'll just push one through by hand for you, so you can put the camera set up so you can see how it interacts with the cutter block. So yeah, just standing back from the machine and watching the process run through the spindle, feeding it in and keeping a nice even pressure on the timber, keeping that twisted action so it's touching the fence at the top and the back fence at the bottom of the piece of wood, and applying that pressure throughout its whole travel through the spindle moulder. It took me years to find this out. I actually did it by trial and error. I've got pretty good at setting the wheels up to machine stuff without it. There is some things that you will absolutely need a back fence for, or else it's just dangerous to machine them. And this would probably be one of them. It's such a fine edge to this architrave. So there we go, that's how I use a back fence for tricky or large spindle moulder cuts where you've not got a lot of surface to rest the wood on. I hope that was a worthwhile bit of viewing. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll crack on and get the rest of these skirting boards moulded up as well, which again I'll be using a back fence for because they're really nice and tall. I can just leave my wheels set up in the orientation they are. I don't have to flip them sideways. I can just run my wheels on the top of the skirting board, and the back fence will keep the pressure nicely against the cutter, and I'll get really nice results from that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. The bags are completely full. Look, I've emptied these 3 times today doing these bloody skirtings and stuff. I'm really enjoying the Trend Air Shield respirator for cleaning my workshop down at the end of the day, and for changing the dust bags, because not only does it protect your lungs from the dust, the biggest benefit of it is you don't get dust in your eyes. Like usually I'd check the bags at the end of the day and empty them perhaps before I went home so I don't get dusty at the start of the next day. But you just end up going home covered in dust and have dust in your eyes and itchy eyes and stuff. Whereas the air shield, you get nothing in your face. It's really, really nice to put that on, get as dusty as you like, then give yourself a dusting down with the airline, and you can go home trouble free. To be fair, it improves your life quality, which is what tools should do. Not finished it yet, like you never will of the workshop project, but I also made this little spindle moulder cabinet, a sneak peek to the people that made it right to the end of the video. So I'm going to make some little boxes or separation areas for each cutter, and in every area we'll have the appropriate sort of knives, the tool to change it, and anything associated with it in its own little pad. So that's working really well, because look how much crap is on here blowing off the moulder today moulding. It's nice and clean in them drawers. I can just give them over with the airline if it does get in there. And the same for these cutters as well. So I've got rid of my cabinet on the wall, and I plan to just get some strips of wood to mount these on. I've got some little stainless dowel pins off eBay, pretty cheap. Just press them tap them into a bit of wood, and then all my cutters can locate on the dowel pins. If I do change them, or I get change the cutters, or get different types of cutters, or go into another drawer and want to move them, I've just got strips of wood that can either be changed and the pins pulled out and replaced or whatever. It's not all done on one big board, and gets difficult to make adaptations to it. So that's what I plan to do with them, but it's working really well so far. Handles are quite cool. They're just some bits of sapele. I bored a hole in and then screwed through from the back with a bit of hanging rail, like a bit of wardrobe rail. It wasn't quite right for a job where they wanted an antique brass decorative rail vertically through some shelves. I bought it to see if it was perfect, but it wasn't. So that's been sat in my workshop ages, so I made some really chunky handles out of it, and they're actually really nice. So I think when I redo my bench area over here, I'm going to make like 2 or 3 sets of them for along the back wall, and then make a really nice bench that sits in front of it, and have all my hand tools, all the tools that are in this box, this wheel box that's always in the way, are going to go on my back wall. Everything has a place, and just be done nicely so that I can secure them all down and then just blow all the dust off it with a sort of leaf blower, and when I've finished at night, everything can be put back and look really neat. Anyway, this quick 2-minute video just to show you my setup, probably gone on for God knows how long now. I'm terrible at keeping videos short, so definitely ending this now.